Have you ever wiped with a piece of dry, single-ply toilet paper and wondered, is this as good as it gets? Well, it's not. It gets a lot better thanks to the wet, extra-large cleaning power of Dude Wipes. They comfortably clean up whatever TP leaves behind on your behind. It's time to stop being an a-hole to your b-hole and start experiencing the confident clean of Dude Wipes. Available at Amazon and at major retailers nationwide. Dude Wipes. Best clean, pants down.
Worried about heart health? Listen to this. A study of over 30,000 people found that nattokinase, an ancient Japanese superfood, can reduce heart attack risk by 25% and stroke risk by 33%. Luma Nutrition has perfected a powerful nattokinase formula made in the USA and third-party tested for purity and quality. Ready to start your journey to a healthy heart? You can try nattokinase today for up to 40% off when you visit lumanutrition.com. That's LUMA Nutrition.com. lumanutrition.com. Veteran-owned, proudly made in the USA.
You're listening to DNA ID, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons, Scene of the Crime, Zodiac Speaking,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime, Campus Killings,
and
Killer Communications.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
It was 1994. On Sunday, November 20th, Ollie Lawrence was very worried. The married father was on a business trip in the Bahamas for his employer US Air, which sounds like a nice gig. But Ollie wasn't enjoying a Mai Tai on the beach. He was stressed because he couldn't get a hold of his wife, Robin. He had called their house late on Friday night but was unable to reach her. He called and called all day Saturday and there was never any answer. This was very odd, as the couple had a 2-year-old daughter, Nicole, and Robin had to work on Saturday. It's not like she was out partying, and she certainly wouldn't have left town without telling him. Yet, when he repeatedly rang the home phone over the weekend, still nothing. On Saturday, Ollie finally called the Fairfax County police, asking if someone could go check on his wife. The dispatcher told him, "We don't do welfare checks, absent a pressing reason, unless we get a request from another agency." That would require Ollie to get the Bahamian police to send a teletype requesting a welfare check. Ollie gave up on that. I imagined it seemed overly dramatic to insist that his wife not answering the phone equated to an emergency. But Ollie continued to worry. So he called Robin's best friend, Lori. He asked her whether Robin was possibly with her. No, she said. Had she heard from her? No, again. Ollie called Lori again on Sunday morning around 6 a.m. This time, he begged her to please go check on Robin. Around midday, Lori and her friend Carlin S. got in her car and drove over to Robin and Ollie's house. It was a modest but bright and cheery home in a family neighborhood in the 8600 block of Reseca Lane in Springfield, Virginia. Arriving at about 12:20 p.m., the two women saw that 2 newspapers and a package were piled on the front stoop, and Robin's blue Mazda was parked inside the closed attached garage. Lori knocked on the front door, but no one responded. They heard only silence. The two women walked around the back of the house and climbed the wooden staircase to the deck, 10 feet off the ground. They climbed over the baby gate at the top of the wooden stairs, and upon landing on the deck found a large window into the living room of the house was standing open. The horizontal blinds were fully drawn down over the window. Lori raised the blind and, peering through the window, called, "Robin, Robin!" There was no response, but Lori was shocked to see little 2-year-old Nicole toddling toward her from around the corner of the hallway leading to the bedrooms. She was dressed in PJs and sucking on a pacifier. Her pajamas had what looked like dried blood smeared on them. Lori and Carlin lifted the window blinds with their hands and climbed into the house. Nicole seemed fine, but was clearly scared and had a bulging, reeking diaper under her PJs. Carlin stayed with Nicole while Lori walked down the L-shaped hallway calling for Robin. As she turned right and approached the master bedroom, she saw blood, a lot of it, all over the master bedroom floor. She later told the Washington Post, quote, "I've never seen blood like that before. It was splattered on the walls and in pools on the floor, dried blood." Lori didn't see Robin, but she turned and ran. She and Carlin scooped up Nicole, climbed back out through the window, handing the toddler through, and fled the house. They ran to the next-door neighbors and called 911 at 12:26 p.m. When first responder Officer M.J. Weaver arrived moments later, Lori was semi-hysterical, his report said. She could gasp only, there's blood, you gotta check." Carlin held baby Nicole, still dressed in her footy pajamas. They led Officer Weaver to the back deck and pointed out the open window. Officer Weaver climbed into the house and walked to the back bedroom, and he saw what Lori would be very thankful that she had not. Robin was lying on the floor of the master bedroom. She was motionless, cool, loose, and limp. Officer Weaver felt for a pulse but found none. Robin was clothed but had blood all over her, visible stab wounds riddling her body, her face slashed. She had been murdered by someone who viciously and brutally stabbed her to death and left her little girl unharmed but alone with her dead mother. Robin was transported to Fairfax Hospital where she was pronounced DOA. Assistant Fairfax medical examiner Dr. Field performed an autopsy. To put it bluntly, Robin had been viciously stabbed and carved up head to toe. She had 45 stab wounds total, all over her head, face, neck, back, stomach, legs, and shoulders. Her face in particular was splayed open, so much so that detectives noted, quote, "The attack on Ms. Lawrence appeared concentrated heavily on her face," end quote. But her body was savaged too, her intestines hanging out. The knife had been thrust into the back of her neck and her throat slit as well. A seasoned detective told me it was like nothing she had ever seen. Robin did have significant defensive wounds to both of her hands, indicating that she futilely tried to fend off the attack. But she can't have lasted long against the cold blade slashing her over and over. Her cause of death was, no surprise, exsanguination due to multiple stab wounds, a homicide. A sexual assault kit was collected by Dr. Field, but it showed no evidence of semen on any of the swabs or slides. Meanwhile, little Nicole was treated at Fairfax Hospital for dehydration and a diaper rash. Lori and Carlin were both interviewed at the Fairfax Hospital emergency room by Detective Jerry Farrell, and detectives began trying to contact Robin's husband. So who was Robin? Robin Warr was born on November 23, 1957, to father Robert Warr Sr. and mother Jessie. She had two sisters, Mary and Deanne, and a brother, Robert Jr. Robin was born in Ithaca, New York, and grew up in Syracuse, graduating from Nottingham High School in 1974. Her father, Robert, was the first Black Syracuse Common Council member. Robin was smart and accomplished. She studied at Pittsburgh's esteemed Carnegie Mellon College of Fine Arts, from which she graduated in 1978. She was a talented artist, winning competitions as a young person, designing a Martin Luther King Jr. Peace Medal, and decorating her home with her paintings. She was also tall, graceful, and athletic, enjoying golf, skiing, modern dance, and swimming, among other activities. Her niece Lauren describes her as an extrovert, someone whose warmth really drew the family together. When she was killed at age 37, the elegant, willowy woman with the megawatt smile was 5'8" and 142 pounds. Robin married in her 20s and lived in Connecticut with her first husband. On a weekend trip to the D.C. area to visit a friend in 1986, she met Ollie Lawrence and they hit it off. Her first marriage was struggling, and she enjoyed a weekend of biking and playing tennis with Ollie and their mutual friends. But she returned to Connecticut and stuck things out with husband number one for another year, until 1987. Freshly divorced and looking for a change, Robin moved to the Northern Virginia area with her friend from a Danbury dance class, Lori. She landed a job at Merchant Tire and Auto at their headquarters in Manassas and worked her way up to become the Director of Promotions and Merchandising. She was a very hard worker and won Employee of the Year and the President's Award at the company of more than 1,000 employees. Of Robin, her boss, William Craig, said, quote, "The only way to describe her is very professional, very classy. She was very well respected. Regardless of when you saw her, she always had a beautiful smile. She was very upbeat." Robin and Ollie, an executive at U.S. Airways in Crystal City, Virginia, quietly started dating. Both a little gun-shy after their respective divorces, they took things slow, dating for 2 years, buying the Reseca Lane house and living together before tying the knot. But finally, Ollie popped the question, and they were married. This is an excerpt from a Washington Post article. Quote, "It was an intimate group of family and friends who gathered on a winter's evening just 5 days after Christmas in 1989 for the wedding at the home. Robin wore a blush-colored brocade jacket, a chiffon skirt, and a scarf draped around her slender neck. Ollie wore a black tuxedo. All along the foyer hung red ribbons. It was very lovely, very touching. They just seemed to be bubblingly happy," Jessie Warr, Robin's mother, recalled. 3 years later, Nicole was born. End quote. Nicole was, of course, a delight, but her health was a source of stress for the young parents. She ended up having to have a liver transplant at age 1. I can't even fathom the terror that 37-year-old Robin must have felt as her attacker came at her in her bedroom, knowing that her vulnerable toddler was just feet away in the next bedroom and being powerless to stop the onslaught that ended her life.
If you've got a move coming up, you really need to look into United Van Lines, the do-it-all moving specialists. With United Van Lines, you don't worry about a thing. You have a dedicated moving coordinator, qualified drivers, and full value protection for your possessions. Compare that to a couple of dudes manhandling your family heirlooms or cramming your things in a container on your driveway. Rather than hope for the best, you deserve a hassle-free move. Visit UnitedVanLines.com. Big moves, small moves, all moves. Easy choice.
This is Jacob Goldstein from What's Your Problem? When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Have you ever wiped with a piece of dry, single-ply toilet paper and wondered, is this as good as it gets? Well, it's not. It gets a lot better thanks to the wet, extra-large cleaning power of Dude Wipes. They comfortably clean up whatever TP leaves behind on your behind. It's time to stop being an a-hole to your b-hole and start experiencing the confident clean of Dude Wipes. Available at Amazon and at major retailers nationwide. Dude Wipes. Best clean, pants down.
Okay, let's talk about the scene of the crime. The Lawrence's green, clapboard contemporary house was on a cul-de-sac in West Springfield's Crossings subdivision. This was situated off Rolling Road and Hillside Road. Hall Street bifurcated the short, two cul-de-sac street. The police station was less than a mile away. A paved driveway led from the cul-de-sac to the home's garage. The house was a 4-bedroom. Nicole's bedroom was right next to her parents'. The majority of the living space was on the main floor, including the living room, the kitchen, and all 4 bedrooms. The lower floor consisted of a finished basement. Detective Mike Headley was dispatched to the Lawrence home in reference to a homicide. When he got there, he was met by Officers Weaver and Hetrick, Lieutenant McHaffey, Lieutenant Craig, Detective Richard Perez, Detective Jerry Farrell, Detective M.E. Garman, Major Libby, and Captain Dave Lubis of the West Springfield District Station. They brought Headley up to speed. A family friend had been requested by Robin's husband to come check on her. She did, and she walked into a bloody crime scene. Patrol officers had secured the scene and ensured that the crime scene was preserved intact so the detectives and CSIs could do their thing. Detective Headley observed that newspapers from both Saturday and Sunday were lying on the front stoop. Mail from Saturday was in the mailbox, along with a USPS envelope labeled Saturday Delivery. It was evident that Robin had not picked up any of these items on Saturday. And that's because she was already dead by that time. Detective Headley observed her body lying on the bedroom floor. Robin lay in a tacky puddle of congealed blood. She lay face down in the corner by the right side of the bed with the wall to her right. She was lying on her right side with the left side of her face on the floor. A pillow lay on top of her legs, the right one of which was extended, the left bent at the knee. Her right arm was under her chest, and her left arm was stretched out on the left side of her body. Robin was dressed in blue cozy pants and a pink nightshirt. But the room was bathed in now dried blood. Blood spatter marked the walls, floor, and unmade bed. On the wall at Robin's head were 2 sprays of blood, one of which had a gouge in the wall in the shape of a knife tip. A sheet covering a love seat at the end of the bed was spattered and stained with a large amount of blood, as were some pieces of clothing on the love seat. A Persian area rug was also heavily bloodstained. Very importantly, visible in the blood on the carpet were 2 impressions of a knife blade, which appeared to be a kitchen knife approximately 6 inches long. Bloody footprints also marred the carpeting. There was significant evidence that Robin and her attacker had struggled. The head of the bed was pushed into the corner of the room, causing the bedside table to be tilted and a lamp that was on the table to be knocked onto the bed. A picture that evidently had been hanging on the wall beside the bed had been knocked to the floor. Baby bottles were scattered on the floor near Robin's body. A small storybook was on the floor near Robin's right foot. Blood was on, under, and in the book. Robin's personal items were scattered. A gold bracelet lay near her on the floor, and her watch was found behind the head of the bed. Photos and things on the dresser appeared undisturbed, including a plastic shopping bag from Marshall's. But a second shopping bag was on the floor. Both contained receipts from the 18th. In the bathroom, the rugs on the floor contained what appeared to be blood transfer. There was also blood on the toilet tank, sink, and the soap dispenser on the sink. Traces of blood were found on the faucet handles, and a blood-stained washcloth was hanging on the tub door towel rod over some towels. It looked as though someone had cleaned up. And detectives were interested in a blood-soaked roll of TP that lay on the blood-stained rug and small pieces of bloody toilet paper scattered on the floor. It seemed that someone was trying to staunch a bleeding cut. Also, on the floor in the bathroom were a pair of black women's underwear, an empty tampon box, and a plastic bag containing some cotton pads. A water glass and a comb were undisturbed on the sink. So the bedroom was a bloody mess, so much though that Lori had run out of the house after seeing it without even checking on the well-being of her friend. But very oddly, there was no blood in the rest of the house. Somehow it seemed the killer had avoided tracking it around on his shoes, other than on the bedroom rug, and did not drip blood throughout the house from his person or weapon either. On the floor, outside the door to the master bedroom, was a piece of bloody tissue, but no other traces of blood. Detectives concluded that the attack appeared to have been limited to the master bedroom. Speaking of the rest of the house, the shades were drawn in the bedroom and throughout much of the house. Only the kitchen stove hood light was found on. All doors, front, rear slider, and garage, were locked up tight. Even the door leading from the attached locked garage into the house was locked. Same for the windows. Only that one window into the living room was not secured. A metal Charlie bar, the type used to secure sliding windows and doors, lay on the window ledge where it had been either dislodged or not in place. All other windows and doors were locked, including the sliding glass doors, which were covered by hanging drapes. All this evidence pointed to the attack occurring at night. Robin was believed to have been asleep or at least in bed when she was assaulted. The blood evidence showed that she jumped out of bed and up against the wall. As the attacker continued to stab her, she slid down the wall at the love seat at the end of the bed, defending herself with her hands. To the right of the love seat is where she fell on the floor and where the 2 impressions of the bloody knife lay. Her attacker had put the knife down on the rug, or possibly even wiped it clean of blood on the carpet. Absolutely terrifyingly, in the master bedroom there was a blue Princess phone stretched out onto the floor, and the receiver was in place on the base, but the coiled cord connecting the receiver to the base was cut. There was blood both on the receiver and under the receiver on the base unit. There was also a nick in the side of the receiver that detectives surmised was possibly caused by a sharp instrument. It appeared that Robin possibly grabbed the phone, and her killer swiftly severed the phone cord so Robin could not summon help. Even though detectives concluded the murder was confined to the bedroom, there was a lot of other stuff disrupted in the home. The house was generally observed to be very neat and tidy, but there was a bunch of stuff that appeared to have been pulled out of cabinets and that was found on the floor throughout the house. This was all attributed to 2-year-old Nicole, who, it appeared, had been put to bed at some point, but then presumably had managed to climb out of her crib. Unless, of course, Robin's killer had lifted her out, an alternative no one wanted to consider. Nicole, it is believed, had been looking for something to eat, water, and things to play with. The drain board in the kitchen had been knocked over into the sink, spilling cups, bowls, and plates into the sink. And on the kitchen floor were baby cups, baby bottles, and other items suspected to have been in the drain board. On the family room floor were more sippy cups and a blanket. In the bathroom, a baby potty lay on its side, and the cabinet above the toilet was open. Thank goodness any medications were secured. I hate to think of baby Nicole looking for food, swallowing something that looked to her like candy. A baby gate was also in place at the top of the basement stairs, keeping Nicole out of harm's way down there. Nicole had also pulled a bunch of stuff out of the kitchen and bathroom drawers and cabinets and piled them on a spare room bed. These were a hammer and screwdriver, toothbrushes, some scissors, a $20 bill, a roll of wire, and several open, clean tampons. In her own room, Nicole had pulled all the tissues out of a box of Kleenex and strewn them about the room. Nicole was found with blood on her pajamas, and Detective Headley believed that Nicole had walked into the bedroom where her mom lay. It's just unbearable to contemplate her trying to wake her mother up, not understanding at all what was going on, and placating herself with finding things in cabinets and gathering her sippy cups and blanket.
If you've got a move coming up, you really need to look into United Van Lines, the do-it-all moving specialists. With United Van Lines, you don't worry about a thing. You have a dedicated moving coordinator, qualified drivers, and full value protection for your possessions. Compare that to a couple of dudes manhandling your family heirlooms or cramming your things in a container on your driveway. Rather than hope for the best, you deserve a hassle-free move. Visit UnitedVanLines.com. Big moves, small moves, all moves. Easy choice.
This is Jacob Goldstein from What's Your Problem? When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Have you ever wiped with a piece of dry, single-ply toilet paper and wondered, is this as good as it gets? Well, it's not. It gets a lot better thanks to the wet, extra-large cleaning power of Dude Wipes. They comfortably clean up whatever TP leaves behind on your behind. It's time to stop being an a-hole to your b-hole and start experiencing the confident clean of Dude Wipes. Available at Amazon and at major retailers nationwide. Dude Wipes. Best clean, pants down.
Let's talk about the suspected point of entry into the home. 2 windows on the right side of the house had holes torn in their screens. But these holes appeared to be older and to be wear and tear holes rather than freshly man-made holes. All signs pointed to the killer's point of entry being the sliding window off the deck. This point of entry window was quite large. This was not your average small 4-pane window. It was vertical and measured approximately 5 feet by 4.5 feet with sliding panels that moved horizontally to overlap when the window was open. These panels measured about 2.5 feet each. Both glass panels were found slid to the right on the tracks and overlapping, leaving the window open. There was a large slash in the lower right corner of the rear window screen covering the non-sliding window pane. Detectives believed that this slash was fresh. The screen on the other half of the window had been removed altogether. It was leaned up against the adjacent sliding glass door. A green mop had been leaned up against the screen, perhaps to keep it from falling over and making a loud clatter. No pry marks were found on the metal rear window frame, but a smudged handprint was on the glass pane right inside the cut on the screen. The lack of latent prints in this handprint led the detectives to wonder if the person making entry had been wearing gloves. What was confusing was that clearly this window was intended to be secured by the Charlie bar that was lying on the windowsill. Had Robin inadvertently left it off? And if so, how would her attacker know that that one window was unlocked? After all, it was the only one whose screen he slashed. Police believed that Robin's killer climbed through the window after removing the screen, slashing the other one, and reaching through and sliding the window open. He stepped in onto a table on which a lamp and some potted plants sat. A plant was also found upright in its pot on the floor. It had been moved off the table by Carlin and Lori when they climbed onto the table to get out the window. CSIs processing the scene observed that 2 large slots in the knife block on the kitchen counter stood empty. 2 large black-handled knives were missing from the block, although it was uncertain whether either or both of them were in fact the murder weapon. But it certainly looked as though Robin's killer had climbed in the window, grabbed a knife from the kitchen, and proceeded down the hall toward where Robin lay asleep. He seemed to know where she would be. Finally, after Robin was dead, her killer left the same way he came in, literally leaving a trail. A bloody piece of tissue was found on the deck. Crime Scene Section officers Mark Garman and James Gogan photographed the scene and checked for latent prints. They powder-processed multiple areas within the home, including the whole area around the entry window, the door frames to the bedroom and master bath, and the bathroom. Prints were obtained along the windowsill, the master bath door, and on the master bath sink. The prints on the sill and door were first photographed and then lifted. A palm print was also obtained on the sink. These were never matched to anyone. In addition, the CSIs were unable to lift viable shoe impressions from the bathroom floor. Here's a list of what was collected at the scene. The Persian rug, the window screens, the mop, the baby gate at the top of the deck stairs, the bedding from the bed, the pillowcase from on Robin's legs, the sheet over the love seat, the bathroom mats, the bloody washcloth, Robin's black bag, which I will address momentarily, various papers and notebooks, a piece of paper with blood on it, a toothbrush found on the ground outside the house, a nightcap on the floor next to Robin, the black underwear from the bathroom, Robin's PJs, Nicole's PJs, hairs and fibers from Robin's body and the bedroom, the drain trap from the bathroom sink, swabs of all the blood in the bedroom and bathroom, the trash from the bedroom bin, the empty tampon box and cotton swab bag, Robin's jewelry scattered in the room, the water glass, soap dispenser, and comb from the sink, a segment of the wall from over Robin's head with the gouge in it, the baby book from the floor, the blue telephone, some long hairs found in the master bedroom, all the pieces of bloody tissue, the bloody TP roll, and the bloody empty cardboard TP roll from the master bedroom floor, all the stuff Nicole had piled on the spare bed and the tissue box she had gotten into, a wine glass and a sponge with a drop of blood from the kitchen sink. Several of these items were analyzed for prints via superglue fuming and then were placed into evidence. Officer E.S. Radisky canvassed the neighbors, going door to door and asking if anyone had heard or seen anything. They hadn't, even though most people said they were home all weekend. One family reported that their dogs started barking like crazy at about 8 p.m. on Friday night for no known reason. Another neighbor said she had knocked on the Lawrence's door on Sunday morning to ask them to sign a petition, and no one answered. She didn't hear or see anything or note anything unusual. Officers Gleason and Scott scoured the wooded area behind the house with metal detectors looking for evidence and the murder weapon. They found nothing. Ollie Lawrence was frantic that neither Robin nor her friend Lori had called him to report that everything was well at home. Lori didn't go over to the house until 6 hours after he called her on Sunday, so he got on a plane to come home from the Bahamas. At his layover at the airport in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, Fairfax PD Lieutenant Grant Troughton informed Ollie that his wife was found deceased. The notes I was provided did not say what his reaction was. Ollie landed at National Airport just outside D.C. at 3:30 p.m., and Officer Mike Ukele picked him up and brought him to the West Springfield District Station, where he was interviewed by Detective Headley. In the interview, Ollie cried when he learned exactly what had happened to his wife. Under questioning, Ollie related the story to police that we already know. He said he called home late Friday night but got no answer. Saturday came, still no answer. He called the West Springfield District Station of the Fairfax PD and asked for a wellness check and was denied. He called Lori and told her of his concern. Lori's phone rang again early Sunday. Lori confirmed this and said Ollie was very anxious and begged her to go check on Robin and Nicole. Investigators thought it was interesting that Ollie was out of town when his wife was attacked. That could imply a number of things, all of which were going to have to be explored. Police reconstructed Robin's timeline for the days leading up to when she was found slain. On Friday the 18th, Robin went to work. Then she did some shopping with Nicole, including at Marshall's, which the police knew from the receipts and bags in her room. She dropped her live-in nanny, Vicky, at the Metro around 6:30. Vicky was the last person, other than presumably Nicole, to speak with Robin that night. When Ollie called late that night, there was no answer. There was a home phone extension in the bedroom, the blue one, and if Robin had been asleep, it likely would have wakened her up. Based on the fact that she was believed to have been in bed and the fact that she never answered Ollie's late-night calls, police came to believe that Robin was killed around 10 p.m. on Friday night. Robin had been expecting her parents and siblings to come to town for Thanksgiving just a week away. Instead, her father Robert had to call the family and tell them that Robin was dead. I don't know who took care of little Nicole in the days and weeks after her mother's murder. She was raised by her dad. But right after the slaying, I imagine Ollie was in no condition to care for a 2-year-old. Robin's parents, sister Mary, and 8-year-old niece Lauren arrived in Virginia on the day after Robin was found, and they stayed in the house, I imagine with Nicole. They would have needed access to all her baby things and probably felt that it was best not to completely and abruptly uproot her from her familiar surroundings. Ollie, though, could not return to the home he had shared with Robin. He did go back once, about a month after the murder, to collect his things, but by this time the house was already on the market. I really struggled with going back, he told the Washington Post. As that paper reported, quote, before leaving the house in December, Robin's parents set up the bedroom the way Robin would have liked, with a new comforter and paisley pillow shams, end quote. The blood had all been cleaned up and the bedroom restored to the way Robin had it. The evidence of the crime had been erased, but its impact would be felt forever. I'm going to discuss some interviews that were done in this case, even with people who were not suspects, because they shed a lot of light on who Robin was as a person. Robin was in a group of friends who called themselves the Sagittarians. They were women named Carla, Jackie, Nancy, Lorana, Lena, and Linda. Police spoke with all these women. Nancy had known Robin for 20 years. She said she had lunch with Robin on the Wednesday prior to the murder, and they had plans to have dinner on Friday night the 18th, but Nancy had to cancel. Nancy had nothing to add to the investigation about Robin. She was a lovely friend, wife, and mother. Lena had known Robin since college and had introduced Ollie and Robin. She said they were smitten immediately and spent those early weekends cooking elaborate meals in his apartment. Carla was described as Robin's best friend, whose husband Calvin was Ollie's best friend. Carla, just like the others, had nothing untoward to say about Robin. Robin's friend Jackie told the Washington Post, quote, Robin just didn't deserve this. She was just too nice. She was a beautiful person. Whoever did it to her should pay. Vicky, the nanny, lived with the Lawrence family during the week, watching Nicole while Robin went to work. Ollie traveled a lot and also worked full-time. Someone had to be around to care for Nicole Monday to Friday. On weekends, though, Vicky went to stay with her family elsewhere in Springfield. How interesting that Robin was killed on a Friday night when Vicky was not typically around. Vicky had no helpful information. She hadn't seen anyone prowling around the house. Robin and Ollie had no enemies and were a beloved couple with supportive friends and loving families. They lived a low-risk lifestyle. They worked white-collar jobs. No one had any dangerous habits. Robin locked the doors and windows. No one left the garage open, and so on. Robin's co-workers at Merchants Tire and Auto in Manassas were all, of course, interviewed as well. Police found no one at the retailer who had a single negative thing to say about Robin, although many of them didn't have details about her personal life. Tara L. worked for Robin in the marketing office at Merchants. She and the other Merchants employees, including her supervisor, vice president in charge of marketing Mark Grote, had nothing but high praise for Robin. She was described as a very conscientious worker, very personable and easygoing, someone who got along with everybody and was extremely well-liked. No one had anything negative to say about Robin. In fact, quote, she would be the last person I would have imagined this happening to, said Chris Wilson, a coworker, to the Washington Post. She was too nice for someone to hurt. Robin's boss, William Craig, told the News and Messenger, quote, we are all baffled by this. No one can understand why so horrible a tragedy as this could happen. You saw her on Friday and you say your pleasantries and see you on Monday as you're leaving, and that just never happened. We were shocked. Everyone is very, very upset about this. She's going to be terribly missed. I know her husband and I've talked with him and he's doing the best he can right now. It's very hard on him, but he has a good, strong family supporting him. Detective Headley reviewed Robin's Rolodex at work and gathered all the names and numbers listed and followed up with each person. Robin's employer, Merchants Tire and Auto, ended up contributing to a $12,000 reward, along with Fairfax County crime solvers and Ollie Lawrence. The funds would be made available to anyone providing information leading to Robin's killer's arrest. Many articles described the Fairfax police as baffled by Robin's case. This was partially because they could not come up with a motive for her violent slaying. Nothing had been taken from the house. As the incident report says, quote, the dressers did not appear to be searched or disturbed. On one of the dressers was the victim's purse. It was closed and contained money, credit cards, keys, and other valuable items, end quote. Robin's jewelry was intact. She wore 3 rings with stones that were collected at her autopsy. Her watch and gold bracelet were found in her room, and $440 in cash in a Crestar Bank envelope was in her jewelry box, which was on the dresser just 4 feet from her body. Robin's black canvas briefcase, which she used for work, was found zipped closed to the right of the love seat in the bedroom. It had been disturbed in the fracas. There was blood on and under the black bag that was at the end of the seat, the report states. So Robin wasn't robbed. In fact, the killer entirely looked past valuables and cash within arm's reach, and she wasn't raped. But she was mutilated in a case of extreme overkill in a confrontation restricted to her bedroom. Detective Headley's report stated, quote, "In conducting an investigation into this matter, it appears that the perpetrator's sole purpose was the attack on Robin Lawrence," end quote. Another contemporary report stated that while they haven't established a motive, it is not believed that this was a random killing by an intruder. I'll bet you can figure out what investigative theory detectives would adopt.
If you've got a move coming up, you really need to look into United Van Lines, the do-it-all moving specialists. With United Van Lines, you don't worry about a thing. You have a dedicated moving coordinator, qualified drivers, and full value protection for your possessions. Compare that to a couple of dudes manhandling your family heirlooms or cramming your things in a container on your driveway. Rather than hope for the best, you deserve a hassle-free move. Visit UnitedVanLines.com. Big moves, small moves, all moves. Easy choice.
This is Jacob Goldstein from What's Your Problem? When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Have you ever wiped with a piece of dry, single-ply toilet paper and wondered, is this as good as it gets? Well, it's not. It gets a lot better thanks to the wet, extra-large cleaning power of Dude Wipes. They comfortably clean up whatever TP leaves behind on your behind. It's time to stop being an a-hole to your b-hole and start experiencing the confident clean of Dude Wipes. Available at Amazon and at major retailers nationwide. Dude Wipes. Best clean, pants down.
Police believed strongly that Robin's slaying was a crime of passion. Someone wanted her dead and had a lot of emotional investment in making that happen. But who? Well, the investigation had uncovered some interesting details, and investigators would form some theories. One of these was that Ollie, Robin's husband, had killed her. Ollie was of great interest for several reasons. One of these was that Robin's killer had left baby Nicole completely unharmed. That was something a parent would do, police thought. Also, he would know that the kitchen window was jimmyable, which I don't think is a word, but you know what I mean. Ollie could very well have pretended to leave for the Bahamas and sneaked in and killed Robin. Then he could have flown to the Bahamas late Friday night and solidified his alibi. It's safe to say that Ollie Lawrence was considered a prime suspect in his wife's slaying. This is all from a Washington Post article 5 months after Robin's murder. Quote, Fairfax County police say they consider Lawrence, U.S. Air's vice president for human resources, to be a suspect in his wife's death, even though he was in the Bahamas the weekend she was slain. End quote. Just as an aside here, detectives had actually flown to the Bahamas and retraced all Ollie's movements that weekend. If he was behind Robin's slaying, they could not figure out how he had pulled it off, but he remained a suspect. Back to the Post. Quote, Lawrence said that is unthinkable. That just really blows my mind. I lost something very dear to me. I'm a victim of a homicide. Before I can get over the grief of that, I have to face the allegation of being responsible for it, he said. I get concerned that they may be spending too much time investigating me, and the real murderer is getting farther and farther away, he added. Officials say spouses are often considered suspects when their mates are killed, particularly when, as in the Lawrence case, there are strong indications at the crime scene that the victim knew the attacker. But a police spokesman said that the investigation has not settled on any single suspect and that until an arrest is made, investigators will pursue a broad range of possibilities, end quote. Well, Ollie's story never wavered. He left on a business trip to the Bahamas on Friday, which was common for him. He invited Robin and Nicole to come along, but Robin had to work over the weekend. He grew worried about his wife and started making calls, first to the police, then to Lori. Police verified the call's origins, but still side-eyed Ollie. and they believed he had a motive for Ollie to get rid of his wife, because Ollie was having an affair. Let's talk about Ollie's girlfriend, whom I'm calling Marla. Ollie was the one who told the police that he was seeing someone on the side. He told the Washington Post that the question of whether he was having an affair was irrelevant to his wife's death, but police vehemently disagreed. Ollie had apparently been seeing Marla for 14 years, including during his entire 5-year marriage to Robin. The 44-year-old professional woman who lived in Temple Hills, Maryland. She and Ollie worked together at U.S. Air. She was an employee relations representative at the now-defunct airline. She knew Ollie was married. It seems they had an arrangement that suited them both. Ollie told the investigators that he had asked Marla to join him on his trip to the Bahamas. In one of her many interviews, Marla told investigators that Ollie had proposed the trip, sharing his itinerary with her. But Marla declined. To police, that meant that she was stateside and in the area when Robin was killed, and that she knew Ollie was away and exactly when she could strike. Maybe she saw it as her opportunity to get rid of the competition. As I said, Marla was interviewed extensively and she was cooperative until it became apparent that she was a suspect when she smartly retained a lawyer. And the investigators zeroed in on her as the prime suspect in this case. She was one of the very few people who had motive to eliminate Robin. Police focused on her to such an extent that they filed a search warrant application to collect hair and blood samples from Marla, which was granted and executed. Remember that some long hairs had been found in the master bedroom crime scene. Investigators thought they were likely Marla's. Police described Marla as just a person of interest to the media, but in fact, their affidavit in support of the search warrant application stated that the Fairfax authorities had good cause to believe that Marla, quote, may be linked to the investigation of the murder of Robin W. Lawrence based on her relationship with Ollie Lawrence and her knowledge of his plans to be out of town for that weekend, end quote. Part of the problem was that Marla did not have an alibi for the weekend of the murder. Police verified that on Friday the 18th, she attended a day-long seminar in North Carolina, along with other U.S. Air colleagues. But she returned to the D.C. area that evening. North Carolina is a short drive and an even shorter flight away from the district. And after that, apparently, she did not have anyone who could vouch for her whereabouts. This is from a Washington Post article dated August 11, 1995, 9 months after Robin's murder. Quote, Ollie Lawrence, who now lives in Alexandria, did not return telephone calls to his home and office yesterday. Marla declined to comment. I don't think it's in her best interest to be discussing the issue with you, said her attorney, Drew Carroll. Carroll said that his client was interviewed by police several months ago, that she had been cooperative with investigators, and that she has since complied with the search warrant. The police warrant specifically requested 2 vials of blood and 20 hairs from Marla's head to test them against evidence found at the Lawrence home. While collecting samples of blood and hair near Robin Lawrence's body, investigators found rootless hairs that appeared to be longer than that of Robin or Ollie Lawrence. Obviously, they've got to check out all their leads, Carroll said. I'm sure they have many other leads. Police said they are operating on the theory that the slaying was not a random attack, no sign of forced entry into the Lawrence home was found, and it was not ransacked. Although he was out of town when the slaying occurred, Ollie Lawrence, U.S. Air's Vice President for Human Resources, was considered a suspect in the case for several months. But police said yesterday that he is no longer considered a suspect. Okay, so as you can hear, police attention had largely turned away from Ollie and onto Marla. But despite the statement in the article I just read, they had not entirely excluded Ollie. It was pretty clear that he had indeed been in the Bahamas all weekend. But police weren't certain that he had not hired somebody to kill his wife, or perhaps colluded with someone who killed his wife. But they could prove nothing. For her part, Marla lawyered up, but she did agree to take a polygraph exam. I don't know for certain that she passed, but investigators backed off their aggressive investigation of her, so I assume she did, and her hair did not match the ones found at the crime scene. Then another complicating factor entered the chat. Fairfax police received an anonymous call from a white female who stated that it was well known in the neighborhood that Robin was having an affair. Oh boy, if Robin was having an affair, that would obviously open up a whole new angle of the investigation. And again, the concept meshed with the evidence police were seeing of a crime of passion, a suspect known to Robin, someone who knew she was home alone and who knew the house, someone like a boyfriend. Also, since Ollie was having an affair, maybe they had an open marriage, and Robin had a side piece too. The problem was that Ollie knew nothing about this, and neither did any of the people interviewed about Robin. Robin had a lot of very close female friends, and not one of them had heard anything about her having a boyfriend. Of course, women can keep secrets. But police dug and dug and simply could not find any evidence of a man who was intimate with Robin other than her husband. It was a mystery. Fairfax investigators started to branch out, looking into burglaries in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area that might share similarities with Robin's. And they submitted Robin's case to the FBI via VICAP, as well as to the Virginia State Police through their HOLT system. But other than continuing to scrutinize Marla and Ollie and query Robin's associates about potential lovers, they were stymied. And so were Robin's loved ones. This is from a Washington Post article 5 months after Robin's murder. Quote, "Now, 5 months after Robin Lawrence's body, stabbed and slashed repeatedly, was discovered in her home by a girlfriend, her slaying remains a mystery. Friends and family members find it difficult to understand why anyone would want to kill a woman so well-liked and respected. They have scheduled a news conference and rally this morning outside the house to distribute flyers and posters in the hope that someone will come forward with information. I can't rationalize someone who knew Robin would want to come in and kill her," said Ollie Lawrence, Jr., 43, in a recent interview at his new home in Alexandria, where he, the couple's 2-year-old daughter Nicole, and her nanny live. End quote. Okay, let's talk about the DNA. You heard me mention that police obtained a search warrant from Marla's blood. What were they comparing it to? Well, they had something. The Virginia State Division of Forensic Science had located DNA on the blood-stained washcloth that was found hanging on the shower door rack, draped over top of towels that didn't appear to have been disturbed. One side of the washcloth had blood on it that was consistent with Robin's own. On the other side was blood that was inconsistent with Robin's, possible suspect blood. This blood contained DNA that belonged to none of Robin, Ollie, or Nicole. This from a supplemental report, quote, "The DNA also was found not to belong to the primary suspect in this case, Marla." Foreign DNA was on the washcloth in the form of blood. Whose was it? Now, let me say here, the police reports I received were very unclear as to what point in time the investigators knew that this foreign DNA was male. I suspect that it was a partial profile, and gender markers were lacking, but I'm not sure. They clearly tested the DNA from the unknown bloodstain against Marla, so it seems apparent that they were working with a sample from which they could not determine sex. Apparently, if the amelogenin marker is missing, sex might not be able to be determined. Anyway, at least initially, they did not know this foreign DNA was male. But spoiler, it was. By 1995, the DNA analysis had obtained sufficient markers for entry into the still new CODIS system, and by 1996, it was also entered into the Virginia State DNA database. There were no matches. But the databases were still fledgling, and more profiles were added every day. Comparison testing in the databases would continue periodically in hopes that such a violent suspect would someday be entered after committing another crime.
If you've got a move coming up, you really need to look into United Van Lines, the do-it-all moving specialists. With United Van Lines, you don't worry about a thing. You have a dedicated moving coordinator, qualified drivers, and full value protection for your possessions. Compare that to a couple of dudes manhandling your family heirlooms or cramming your things in a container on your driveway. Rather than hope for the best, you deserve a hassle-free move. Visit UnitedVanLines.com. Big moves, small moves, all moves. Easy choice.
This is Jacob Goldstein from What's Your Problem? When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Have you ever wiped with a piece of dry, single-ply toilet paper and wondered, is this as good as it gets? Well, it's not. It gets a lot better thanks to the wet, extra-large cleaning power of Dude Wipes. They comfortably clean up whatever TP leaves behind on your behind. It's time to stop being an a-hole to your b-hole and start experiencing the confident clean of Dude Wipes. Available at Amazon and at major retailers nationwide. Dude Wipes. Best clean, pants down.
In August of 1996, the case was reviewed by the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit at Quantico. A Fairfax police summary report of the BAU's findings says, quote, "It is their belief that the perpetrator of this crime most likely is a male, based on the severity of the struggle and the control over the victim. However, they wouldn't rule out a female." Gee, thanks. Detective Mike Headley continued to work Robin's case for more than 2.5 years. In June of 1997, he was transferred out of homicide and handed the case over to Detective R. Perez. Headley's June 9, 1997 report says basically, there are no leads and we have not identified any particular suspects in this matter. The investigation is ongoing. So Detective Perez took over. In April of 1998, he met with Ollie, and they discussed Ollie's theories over the course of a 2-hour meeting. Ollie had never before seen the crime scene photos, and Detective Perez showed them to him. I can't believe he wanted to see them, and perhaps he regretted it, because the detective's notes said he became visibly emotional. Ollie also agreed to submit to a polygraph. Upon request from Detective Perez, Ollie shared his theories about the case, based purely on his own speculation. The first was that Robin was the victim of a random break-in. The D.C. area was dangerous, and some criminal high on drugs had just selected their house at random. The second was that possibly Marla, Ollie's former lover, was involved in killing Robin. And number 3, Robin was having an affair with someone who killed her. They discussed the likelihood of each of these theories. From Perez's report, quote, "As for the theory that Robin had a secret lover, this is purely speculation by Ollie. This investigation has not revealed any evidence that Robin was engaged in a secret relationship with anyone," end quote. And as for theory number 1, the random break-in, Perez told Ollie that this seemed unlikely. There were no similar crimes in the neighborhood or surrounding areas. That left theory number 2, that Ollie's girlfriend at the time had something to do with it. Detective Perez's report reads, quote, "Ollie believes strongly that Marla has involvement," end quote. So it seemed they had circled back to where they started. And indeed, there was no movement on Robin's case, and within 2 years, it was assigned to the cold case squad. The unit intended to submit more evidence to the lab to see if they could update the DNA profile in CODIS. Over this time period, Detective Perez brought up the Lawrence case monthly at the Fairfax PD criminal investigators meetings. Most detectives at the meetings agreed that it seemed inconsistent with the burglary. In the mid-2000s, there was some updated testing on the case since none had been done in 10 years. A May 7, 2004 report by Detective S.G. Milewski states that Robin's sexual assault kit, called a PERC in Virginia, which stands for Physical Evidence Recovery Kit, the blood-stained washcloth, and blood samples from Ollie and Robin were all submitted to the Commonwealth's Division of Forensic Science. Lab analyst Karen Ambrosi issued a report verifying that the foreign DNA profile from the blood on the washcloth was, quote, indicative of a male contributor. She also wrote that it did not originate from Ollie. The updated profile would be submitted to both the Virginia DNA Databank and CODIS for periodic searching. Detective Milewski notified both Ollie and Robin's father, Robert Warr, of these findings, and that the profile had been entered into the databases, which would be searched regularly. They were both very happy to hear that the case was still actively being worked. A year passed. Ollie called Detective Milewski on February 17, 2005, and spoke with him and Detective Murphy. He told them that he had been frustrated with the lack of progress made by the original investigators. He felt that Detective Headley had not investigated sufficiently. Specifically, he felt that the suspect could be in his and Robin's circle of friends. He wondered about the recorded tip call made to the police department in 1994 regarding an affair Robin was supposedly having. Ollie seemed to have moved past Marla because he felt now that the suspect fell into one of two camps. One was a random burglar, and the second was someone who was seeing Robin. Ollie said it had occurred to him that maybe Robin had turned down his invitation to join him in the Bahamas because she was seeing someone. He didn't really seem to believe this, but the possibility had to be considered. And he told the detectives that if Robin was indeed having an affair, then it was likely it was with someone the couple knew. Robin worked mostly with females at her office, he said. He felt it was much more likely that her lover, if one existed, was someone in their circle of friends. When pushed, Ollie said he couldn't think of anyone in his life who could have killed Robin, except for one guy whose name is redacted in the files I received. Ollie said he and Robin socialized with this man. His wife was a good friend of Robin's. Ollie had called him for support when he found out about Robin's murder, and the guy had come down to the police station when Ollie was there to be there for him. But Detective Headley had told Ollie that they were looking at this guy to see if he was having an affair with Robin, so Ollie became suspicious. Eventually, he told this guy that he had been named by detectives, and that was the end of their friendship. The buddy flat out denied any affair, and the two had not spoken since. Ollie indicated that his and Robin's friends had all sort of split off after the murder. I imagine being questioned by police and looked at as possible lovers and even suspects was just too much for many of them to handle. The 2005 investigators ended their conversation with Ollie with some bad news, which was basically that the case was stalled. They had a DNA profile, but it hadn't matched to anyone, likely ruling out the burglar or serial killer angle. Detective Milewski's supplemental report dated March 2nd, 2005, says, quote, Detective Murphy and I discussed with Ollie Lawrence the possibility of doing additional DNA analysis, which could determine the race of the suspect blood found on the washcloth collected from the master bathroom. The additional analysis of it is available only through a commercial laboratory, since it is not a service offered by the Commonwealth's Division of Forensic Science, end quote. Basically, they told Ollie, we don't have funds to pay for analysis by a private lab. But that soon changed. In October of 2006, Detective Milewski and forensic scientist Karen Ambrosi discussed testing the blood on the washcloth to try to determine the race of the killer. Ms. Ambrosi contracted with DNA Print Genomics in Tampa, Florida, and sent them DNA extract from the washcloth. DNA Print Genomics received the sample on October 25, 2006, and the analysis was completed and a report issued on November 15th. The suspect who stabbed and slashed Robin Lawrence to death in her bedroom was a white male of 100% European descent. Once again, Ollie, who was black, was excluded. It was time to revisit the file and prioritize white men. And in February 2009, Detective Robert Murphy found a name in the file that intrigued him. A man named Arnold had been identified as a potential suspect by the early investigators. Arnold had been arrested for peeping on November 6, 1994, at a home very near Robin's. As many of you know from listening to my show, so-called peeping Toms often escalate to commit more serious sex crimes, and this guy had been doing it in Robin's neighborhood only about 12 days before her murder. A peeper like Arnold would likely know that Ollie was away. He would know how to be stealthy and possibly how to defeat the Charlie bar on the window. Now that they had an STR DNA profile in evidence, Detective Murphy wanted to track down Arnold the peeper so he could conduct comparison testing. Arnold was still living in the area. Detective Murphy called his home and left a message at 7:45 a.m. on Friday the 18th. No one called him back. He left another message the next day at 6:45 a.m. This time, Arnold's wife called him back and promised that her husband would call about giving an elimination DNA sample. But he didn't. Detective Murphy waited until March 18th, when at 7 a.m. he called again and left another message. Again, no one called him back. Finally, on March 19th at 8:30 in the morning, he went over to Arnold's home in Harford County, Maryland, and knocked on the door. No one answered, but there was a silver Hyundai Sonata in the driveway registered to Arnold. Detective Murphy called the home and left a message that he was waiting in front of the home, but no one came out. So he sat and watched the house, and around 9 o'clock he spoke with a neighbor on Pinehurst Court who told him that, yes, the Hyundai in the driveway was Arnold's, and that Arnold worked from home on his IT stuff. Arnold was ignoring the detective's requests for a conversation. Well, Detective Murphy was about to get lucky. He noticed that it appeared to be trash day in the neighborhood, and Arnold had a black trash bag in front of his house on the public street. Murphy snagged it and put it in his cruiser. I hope they disinfect those things on the regular. Then at 9:05 a.m., Arnold came out of his house and stood on the porch. Detective Murphy approached him and introduced himself with his police credentials. He asked if they could go inside and talk, and Arnold said no, but they could talk on the porch. Detective Murphy explained to him that a suspect DNA profile existed in the Robin Lawrence case from 1994, and it belonged to a white male. Detective Murphy requested a buccal swab DNA sample from Arnold because of his 1994 arrest for peeping, to exclude him from the investigation. Arnold said he would not comply with the request and stated he was wrongly convicted on the peeping charge. The detective asked Arnold if that was his household trash at the end of his driveway, and he said it was. This is a quote from Detective Murphy's report. Quote, I told Arnold that I had taken the trash and he demanded it back. I told him that the trash would be tested for DNA, but he refused to provide me with the buccal swab DNA sample. He told me to contact his attorney, but refused to give his name and number, end quote. That's not suspicious. When he got back to the station, Detective Murphy went through the bag of trash and found several Diet Dr. Pepper and Diet Ginger Ale cans and bottles that appeared to be suitable for DNA analysis. It also contained mail and receipts with Arnold's name on it, verifying that he had the trash from the correct home. So on March 23rd, Detective Murphy gave 12 items to the state lab for DNA analysis by forensic scientist Karen Ambrosi. Her testing report was not in until January 26th of 2010. The certificate of analysis stated that the DNA profile from lab items 1 and 4, an empty Diet Dr. Pepper bottle and an empty Diet Ginger Ale bottle, was a male profile. Since Arnold lived only with his wife and they had no children, it was assumed that the DNA profile on those items came from him. But the DNA profile did not match the suspect DNA profile. Arnold was eliminated as a suspect. He was cagey with police for some other reason, not because he had killed Robin.
If you've got a move coming up, you really need to look into United Van Lines, the do-it-all moving specialists. With United Van Lines, you don't worry about a thing. You have a dedicated moving coordinator, qualified drivers, and full value protection for your possessions. Compare that to a couple of dudes manhandling your family heirlooms or cramming your things in a container on your driveway. Rather than hope for the best, you deserve a hassle-free move. Visit UnitedVanLines.com. Big moves, small moves, all moves. Easy choice.
This is Jacob Goldstein from What's Your Problem? When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Have you ever wiped with a piece of dry, single-ply toilet paper and wondered, is this as good as it gets? Well, it's not. It gets a lot better thanks to the wet, extra-large cleaning power of Dude Wipes. They comfortably clean up whatever TP leaves behind on your behind. It's time to stop being an a-hole to your b-hole and start experiencing the confident clean of Dude Wipes. Available at Amazon and at major retailers nationwide. Dude Wipes. Best clean, pants down.
In the fall of 2009, with the 15th anniversary of Robin's murder fast approaching, Detective Murphy proposed to WRC-TV journalist Joe Krebs, who had worked with the Cold Case Squad in publicizing several cases in the past, that he do a piece on Robin's unsolved case. Krebs was game, so Detective Murphy called up Robin's family and asked them to participate. Ollie was now living in New Haven with his daughter Nicole, who was 17 at that time, and he readily agreed to meet with the reporter for an anniversary piece. Robin's father, Robert, didn't want to appear on camera, but was very happy that interest was being shown in his daughter's long unsolved case. Robin's friends Tara and Lori also agreed to participate. Detective Murphy told each of them that the DNA evidence was pointing to a white male, but neither of them had any helpful information about who that man could be. Detective Murphy also approached Kyung Jo, the man who had moved into the Reseka Lane house in 1995. He said he had not learned of the murder until later. Yikes. That kind of thing should have to be disclosed. The piece on the unsolved murder aired on NBC4 Washington on December 8th and December 9th of 2009. No phone calls were generated. Then, in January of 2010, when the test results came in eliminating the peeper Arnold as a suspect, Detective Murphy placed the case on inactive status. All right, skipping ahead a few years. I have zero details on this, but at some point in the 2010s, a familial DNA search had been done in Virginia's DNA database with no helpful results. Fairfax Police Department Detective Chris Flanagan began looking into the Lawrence case in 2019. The suspect DNA had been in both the federal and state DNA databases for decades with no hits. So Detective Flanagan began exploring the new concept of investigative genetic genealogy. On July 8, 2019, Detective Flanagan shipped the extract of the DNA sample to Parabon Nanolabs, based in Virginia. Parabon produced a phenotype image of the suspect at age 25. He was white, with fair skin, green or blue eyes, brown or blonde hair, not black, and a little bit of a longer face. Ancestry information was as follows. The suspect was 46.5% Northern European, 36.5% Southeastern European, and 11.2% Southern European. Further, his most likely Y chromosome haplogroup was R1A-M417, most common in Eastern Europe. Parabon's report warned, though, that even though the suspect's paternal line would likely show heritage from Eastern Europe, he may not carry an Eastern European surname. Detective Melissa Wallace showed Ollie Lawrence the composite image to see if the suspect looked familiar, but he said that it did not. As for an IgG analysis, Parabon's report was not optimistic. The highest centimorgan match to the suspect in GEDmatch was 47. There were 4 top matches in the 40s and many small matches from a variety of locations in the US, Canada, Europe, and Australia. The genotyping call rate of the sample was only 72%, and it was possible that due to missing DNA, some of the matches were more closely related than they appeared. But Parabon's September 5, 2019 report stated that their results were unlikely to generate actionable information because the centimorgan count for the top match was very low. In March of 2020, Detective Flanagan requested an upload to Family Tree DNA. The results, reported on April 15, 2020, showed that there were a total of 911 possible family matches to the suspect DNA submitted, but none were higher than the 47 centimorgan top match. The case was assigned a level 5 on Parabon's genetic genealogy assessment scale, meaning that with the current data, it was virtually unsolvable. The Fairfax PD Cold Case Unit had a civilian volunteer in police service known as a VIP working for them named Liz Megginson. She was a hobbyist genealogist who offered to begin working on the Lawrence case IgG. She began researching the family trees of the top matches, but it was an uphill battle because the numbers were so low and she had very little to work with. The Fairfax team consulted with Parabon throughout 2020 and into 2021, including the genealogist assigned to the case, Christine Green. She and the volunteer genealogist Ms. Megginson compared notes, but little progress had been made. On October 21, 2021, Detective Melissa Wallace, who had taken up the Robin Lawrence case, met with Caitlin Eccles of Parabon, Christine Green, the Parabon genealogist, and C.C. Moore of Parabon. They agreed that Ms. Megginson should reach out to the top matches to confirm their family trees. But the progress was so slow, the IgG so laborious, that the Fairfax investigators had to stop working with Parabon. They simply could not continue to pay for the IgG analysis, since it had such a low predicted success rate. But the volunteer genealogist, Ms. Megginson, continued to work on the case. In total, she worked on the IgG for 3 years. She conducted no reference testing, and she had numbers in the 40 centimorgan range to start with. It was painstaking and extremely complex. But finally, on August 15th of 2023, she notified Detective Wallace that she may have located a possible suspect. She had located a distant relative of the top match who was a white male and who was in the Army stationed at Fort Myer in Arlington, Virginia at the time of Robin's murder. He was part Irish, but his father was from the Czech Republic. His name was Stefan Smirk. Detective Wallace located a DMV picture of Smirk from 1998, and Parabon genealogist Christine Green located a 1988 high school yearbook photo of him. Detective Wallace compared these photos with the Parabon phenotype of the Lawrence suspect, and the resemblance was striking. Stefan Smirk, who apparently went by Steve, was alive, residing in Niskayuna, New York, with his wife and 2 high school-aged kids. It was time for a field trip. On September 7, 2023, Detective Wallace and her partner, Detective John Long, staked out Steve Smirk's modest but tidy brick-and-clapboard home on South Country Club Drive in Niskayuna. The house was well kept with a wreath on the front door and a literal white picket fence out front. The detectives watched the house until, at about 3:30 p.m., the front door opened and a man walked out with a bag of household trash. Isn't it crazy how these guys are so often going about their mundane lives with zero inkling that their worlds are about to come crashing down? Such was the case with Smirk. He deposited the trash and went back in the house. Well, the detectives didn't do what you were expecting. They didn't grab the trash and zip off to the station to paw through it for DNA-laden goodies. Instead, they compared contemporary RMV photos of Stefan Smirk at that address with the man they had just seen and confirmed that he was their suspect. Then they approached the home and knocked on the door. Smirk opened the door and the detectives identified themselves. They explained that they were cold case detectives from Fairfax County, Virginia, working on a case from the 1990s. They asked if they could come in. Smirk allowed them to enter, and the group made themselves comfortable in a sitting room just inside the front door. I think Smirk knew as soon as they said where they were from what this little visit was about. Detective Wallace explained to Smirk how IgG generally worked and told him that their agency had used IgG on an old case out of Fairfax, and that it appeared that someone in his family tree was connected to the suspect in their case. She didn't tell him who the victim was or that he was the suspect. She simply asked straight up if he would be willing to provide a sample of his DNA to help further the IgG investigation. Smirk didn't hesitate, didn't ask any questions like, "What case is this?" or "How will my DNA be used?" Instead, he immediately said sure, and sure enough signed a consent form. The detectives obtained the buccal swabs, packaged them up and sealed them, and said thank you. On the way out, Detective Wallace left her business card with Smirk and said, if you have any questions, just call. They left the home at approximately 3:45 p.m. The detectives went back to their motel where they anticipated finding some food and going to bed early before driving back to Virginia the next day. But that's not what happened. At 5:17 p.m., Detective Wallace's cell phone rang. It was Steve Smirk's number. Detective Wallace told me the first thing that went through her mind when the murder suspect called her phone was that he wanted to revoke the consent he had given her to test his buccal swab for his DNA. He had readily agreed to submit his DNA. She assumed that now that he had time to think about it, he wanted to change his mind. If that was the case, she was obligated to destroy the buccal swabs without testing them. But that's not what he said. Quite the opposite. He said he was at the local police station in Niskayuna to turn himself in. Turn yourself in for what? Detective Wallace asked, taken aback. Well, you guys have my DNA. It's just a matter of time, he said. Smirk had driven to the police station but had not found anybody around to whom he could speak. It was after 5 o'clock on Friday. It appeared the small-town police station was pretty much deserted. Detective Wallace told Smirk to call 911 and explain that he was there and he needed an officer to be dispatched to his location. She told him she would also call and see to it that officers were dispatched. They hung up the phone, and when she called 911 to request that officers respond to Smirk at the police station and stay with him until she and her partner arrived, the 911 call taker advised that dispatch had also received a call from Smirk and patrol officers had been sent to take him into custody. Detectives Wallace and Long drove over to the Niskayuna police station and met with Detective Paul Daly and Deputy Chief Joe Twitty. They were informed that Smirk was in custody and had been cuffed by Officer Derek Breslin. Officer Breslin explained to the detectives that he was inside the police station when he heard the dispatch call that someone was there to turn themselves in a cold case. When he went outside, he encountered Smirk. Smirk knelt down and put his hands on the wall and said, "I'm here to turn myself in." Officer Breslin asked, "On what?" Smirk answered, "On a cold case homicide." Breslin asked him, "How long?" And Smirk answered, 1994. Yep, he knew exactly what case it was. Officer Breslin took Smirk into custody and put him in a cell. While this was happening, Smirk said to him, "Yeah, they came up here and took my DNA earlier. I've already called my wife and told her this was coming. It was 20 years ago when I was in the military." When you hear about Smirk's wife, you'll hear how incredibly lucky it was that he was willing to talk to the Virginia detectives. But he was. Detective Wallace and Detective Long requested that Smirk be placed inside an interview room so they could talk to him. A formal recorded interview of the suspect commenced at 6:13 p.m. He was read his Miranda rights, he signed a form waiving them, and they got started. On the tape, Smirk looks like a completely normal dude, an everyday American dad. He sits with one ankle crossed across the opposite knee. He's wearing a black t-shirt and olive pants and white socks with black sneakers. Glasses. He looks detached. His tone is flat. He says, "Where do you want to start?" He clearly knows he's going to be here for a while and they were going to go over a lot of things. They dug into his family history a little bit, which I will cover later. Smirk said that a couple of years after high school, he decided to join the military. I noted that his father was a military man, so maybe he was trying to follow in his footsteps. But Smirk gave a different rationale. He said he decided to join the military because he had frequent thoughts of killing someone. Smirk told the detectives that he had been diagnosed bipolar, but he did not seem to blame his condition for causing his actions that night. He said he was highly influenced by demons and that he sought counseling for about 6 years. And he said he knew it was wrong to kill, but he was compelled. They got down to the night of the murder, Friday, November 18th, 1994. This was during the first year of Smirk's service when he was stationed at what was then known as Fort Myer in Arlington, near Arlington National Cemetery. That night, he consumed 2 beers and some ephedrine, a stimulant. He got in his white Chevy pickup and drove to a neighborhood where a friend lived and where the two had partied with others. He wanted a familiar neighborhood so he could select a victim, he said. He parked his pickup, quote, in a driveway beside his friend's home. Let me say here that detectives are not sure whether this story is true. In the extensive canvass that was conducted back when Robin was first murdered, the neighbors were talked to, but it's unclear whether Smirk was friends with any of them. Certainly none of them mentioned having a military friend who came over and partied. Detective Wallace told me that the layout of Robin's neighborhood was quite tight, and it's very unclear where Smirk would have parked his car. A strange car parked anywhere in a